first glance, Ottendorf looks like a tranquil place. Cows, dikes, and the sea define the coastal landscape in northern Germany, where the river Elbe flows into the North Sea. But the picture postcard atmosphere is under threat. For some time, the locals have been running a campaign to protest against development plans. Ottendorf may be off the beaten track, but it's right next to the river Elbe, one of Europe's most important waterways. Soon, heavy machinery is set to move in to dredge deeper into the river and make it fit for a new generation of even larger ships. The plans amount to Europe's largest infrastructure project. Now, the people of Ottendorf are calling on the courts to stop the excavators. They say the project destroys the very basis of the tourism most of them live from, their mudflats. That's why all these people are protesting against deepening the river Elbe, this guide says. They're worried that one day the mudflats left will simply disappear. If the river gets deeper, the water will wash away the tidelands, leaving the dikes exposed. And then what happens? One day the dikes will give way, and then we'll have a different problem altogether. As you can see, this sign tells you that passing ships can be dangerous. Every day, huge container ships make their way to the port of Hamburg, about 130 kilometers upstream. To keep this traffic going, the river Elbe has to be deep enough. But the ships keep getting larger. So which is more important, nature or business? Dredging the riverbed has a negative impact on nature, and nature is the selling point for Ottendorf's tourism industry. Mayor Klaus Johansen is battling to defend his town's livelihood. He says they have 520,000 overnight stays per year in a place that counts about 7,000 inhabitants. A turnover of 60 euros per guest adds up to 30 million euros per year. That's a decisive economic factor. Ottendorf's streets are lined with one vacation home after another. The town has spent millions of euros on tourism, an investment that's been paying off. In medieval times, Ottendorf was a center of commerce. After a relatively short industrial boom, most inhabitants live off tourism these days. We could do better, says this tourist guide, but the town is up to scratch because Ottendorf can stick to a budget. Ottendorf has teamed up with environmental organizations and other communities to file a lawsuit against the River Elbe dredging project. Only a few weeks ago, this area was full of swimmers. After the last major dredging in 1998, the currents here got so strong that they swept away parts of the mudland. If that happens again, this beach will be lost. We've filled in the ground here twice already after the last dredging work, the mayor says, and now the edge of the flat has been reinforced. But we don't know how long it will last. We need the mudflats for tourism. This suction dredger is used to deepen the river Elbe. It's constantly used to keep the navigation channel deep enough for large container ships. A tugboat brings the new shift of workers out to the suction dredger. Also on board is the head of Möbius, the company that owns the heavy equipment in use here, as well as the head of Hamburg's Water and Shipping Authority. The federal agency initiates new dredging and inspects the work that's being carried out. Here you can see the area where we've been instructed to excavate the mud, he says. And here you can see the depths we're aiming at, 14 meters, for example. The shipping authority measures the depths in advance and gives instructions on the work to be done. It's also in charge of implementing the contentious new excavation project. Möbius boss Markus Stunkel shows me the ship. It's one of the newest of its kind. It's like a giant bathtub that sucks up thousands of tons of mud and sand. This is the dredge draghead, he says. It digs up the material. The giant metal teeth rip up the riverbed. The river Elbe is already 14 meters deep. But for the new generation of container ships to have enough space, the river has to be another meter deeper. The suction pipe and the dredge head are lowered down. Along with the slush, countless fish and plants are sucked into the loading space. But Detlef Wittmus from the Shipping Authority says the damage is only temporary.
An der Stelle ist dann eine Furche und alles was da war, das ist dann
It creates a trench in the ground, and everything that used to be down there ends up in the cargo bay, he says. That's the way it is, but nature recovers quickly. 38 million cubic meters of mud need shifting to carry out the planned deepening of the River Elbe, potentially a large contract for Markus Stunkel. This is a large project, and it means a lot of work for us, he says. I really hope it'll get started maybe next year.
All
the equipment is controlled from here. The work is paid per cubic meter of mud. When the ship's hull is full, it heads out to the North Sea or to other parts of the Elbe and dumps its load, around 7,000 cubic meters at a time. It's a lot of time and effort, with a lot of jobs at stake. Hamburg is the largest and most important port in Germany, he explains. Keep in mind that it provides some 150,000 jobs, directly or indirectly. So we can safely assume that dredging work in the River Elbe, and especially the next deepening of the navigation channel, are cost-effective. About 50 million euros are spent on dredging work every year. The new excavation project will cost taxpayers about 500 million euros. This is the port of Hamburg, the transfer site for goods from around the world. It's the second largest port in Europe. Its largest rival is Rotterdam in the Netherlands, in global terms just a stone's throw away. Kai Kilian has been working at the port for 15 years. He lives out in the countryside in Schleswig-Holstein. He says some of his colleagues who live in Ottendorf are in favor of deepening the Elbe. He works at the port and says he'd be out of a job if the navigation channel didn't get deepened and the large container ships couldn't come into Hamburg anymore. The shipping companies don't care whether it's Hamburg or Rotterdam. If Hamburg no longer works for them, they'll just head for Rotterdam. They'll be laughing at us. Kai Kilian oversees workflows at the port. When a container ship arrives, he has to check whether it's been moored properly. This is a ship that'll be heading for Africa soon, he says. He also checks whether the ship is being unloaded correctly. He says his colleague is checking the containers that are being discharged. He checks whether they have been logged into the system. All this takes place under immense time pressure. The large container ships can only arrive or leave when the tide is high. The time window is barely long enough to discharge the load. That's another reason why everyone here wants to see the Elbe get deeper. Then this would no longer be an issue. The ships keep getting bigger, not smaller, he says. These days, port workers fear for their jobs. That's why trade unions and industry bosses are pulling in the same direction on this. Thomas Menzrich, a Works Council member, sees no alternative to deepening the Elbe. He thinks it's inevitable. Most of our goods get shipped back and forth across the globe so many times, he says. How much sense does this make in the long run? How much can our planet cope with this? I think for now, none of these questions are seriously being discussed.
werden zurzeit auch überhaupt nicht wirklich ernsthaft diskutiert.
So does this major river excavation of the Elbe make sense? While there are clear benefits for some, many are set to lose out.
Sturmwarnung Nummer 616 für die deutsche Nordseeküste.
Harald Seck and his father Walter are both fishermen on the Elbe. Both fear for their fishing grounds. If you hit a lucky spot, one big catch can bring in several thousand euros. But Walter Seck says when the suction dredgers move in and even more of the riverbed gets ripped away, the fish will no longer be where they used to be.
The
dredger crushes everything you see here, including small fish like these flounder, he says. Walter Seck is annoyed that while for some this will mean big business, his livelihood will be destroyed. Around half of their fishing grounds will be affected. This could mean the end to 6 generations of fishing tradition in his family. Fishermen need nature to survive, he says, but we're in danger of losing it here. They'd rather see a fisherman in the Seychelles or Norway than here on the Elbe. That's the way the shipping authority is behaving. Livelihoods are at risk in both camps. One thing's for sure, there won't be any solution that accommodates all interests, not as long as European ports are competing for every ship and every container.